Rome's expansion was more improvised than planned. From the small walled town through a patchwork of alliances with friends and conquered foes, Rome controlled most of Italy. And from that, the Romans soon came into conflict with the other great superpower of the day, the city of Carthage. Because there was actually another empire out there to rival Rome. The Romans' network of alliances put pressure on them to intervene in support of friends and allies further and further afield. It's a bit like what happens to modern superpowers. One particular request for help had defining consequences. During a dispute between two Sicilian towns, different groups appealed to Rome and to Carthage. After intense debate in Rome between those spoiling for a fight and those who thought Rome was far better off out of it, the Romans decided to go in. And that was how Rome and Carthage first came face to face in conflict. Across a narrow strip of water, the island of Sicily, more Greek than Italian, became the setting of Rome's first overseas war, a naval war against the Western Mediterranean's most powerful seafaring state. The Romans hadn't had or needed fighting ships before. The story goes that what they did is find a Carthaginian ship and copy it over and over again. It was a big turning point, and in 241 BC, these waters were crowded with the dreadnoughts of the ancient world, fighting it out in a final messy battle.
When we see them, it's always exciting.
Built into the ship's bows, these rams did exactly that, rammed the enemy vessels.
But what we've seen from the evidence is obviously there was a lot of destruction at sea level, or sea surface level. Yeah. So all of that is spread out. The helmets, the rams themselves all have frontal damage. Now you got 11 rams, so 10 from this side.
So they're actually going
or hitting something.
Jeff's work that I can get my hands on some of the actual remains of this battle. This extraordinary object is one of the bronze rams that would have been fitted to the front of the ships underneath the waterline. This one clearly did pierce an enemy ship because part of a Carthaginian plank is still fixed to it. It's quite nicely decorated. There's a helmet here, kind of helmet logo with feather plumes. And all down here is a wonderful trace of Roman officialdom. It says Lucius Quinctius, the quaestor, that's the quality control agent, approved this ram. Sort of marvellous Roman administrative efficiency. Actually a wonderful contrast with the one Carthaginian ram that's been discovered, which has on it instead, oh, may the god Baal, strike your ships and make a hole in them. The end result of all this was that the Carthaginians were pushed out of Sicily altogether, and the island became the first overseas territory under Roman control. In a way, you might say that the Roman Empire began here. Rome defeated Carthage twice more. First was the famous occasion when Hannibal pulled off the stunt of crossing the Alps with his elephants, only to lose out eventually on all fronts. The Romans finished the job years later in 146 BC. Whether they were really anxious about Carthaginian recovery or simply wanted to show their muscle, they launched an expedition to North Africa under one of the Scipios, and they razed the city to the ground. As one hardline senator had repeatedly insisted, Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. We don't know what actually drove Rome to annihilate the city of Carthage. They'd taken over most of the Carthaginian Empire when they defeated Hannibal, so maybe it was a devastating display of imperial self-confidence. But 146 would also be remembered for another city's destruction. This was the year that Rome sacked Corinth, the wealthiest city in Greece. "146 would become ingrained in the minds of every Roman, the year when Rome became so powerful that it no longer had any serious challengers left. The destruction of two of the most famous cities in the Mediterranean changed the rules of the game forever. There was still no sign of a Roman master plan, or that they really wanted actually to govern anywhere, but they now had more power than anyone else, even if they didn't really know how to use it. Basically, the Roman priority was to get their own way. But 146 was also an ambivalent year. Some people certainly celebrated, but others already saw it as the beginning of the end. That there's a logic in the history of empires. When you get to the top, you can only come down. Carthage was wiped from the earth, but Greece was very different, and it gave Rome something more precious than economic profit: its culture. Conquest didn't just change the people that Rome conquered, it changed Rome too. And it was thanks to Greece that Rome started to become full of marble columns, elegant statues, and objets d'art. This was the very beginning of the Rome we know, and also the beginning of a flourishing art market.